Hello everyone, Super Adam Bomb here, and on today's video, I'm going to anger an entire fan base just because I can. In all seriousness though, please be civilized in the comments. I do understand that this is quite the controversial opinion I have, but it's just my opinion. If you think that this game is an absolute masterclass in storytelling, then that's great. Alright, that's cool. Let's just all be respectful to each other's opinions. I'd also like to add that I am criticizing the game as it is now, not what it will be in the future. When the next 3 chapters are released, my opinion just might change, but who knows. One last thing, I know that I said I would make a Halo 5 rewrite, but it just wasn't working for me, so I am sorry if you were waiting for that. Now, without further ado, here's why I think Undertale is better than Deltarune. I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, aren't I? Now, first off, I'd like to talk about the positives and what I felt was improved upon from Undertale. This game, though the title may have not seemed like it, is a really good game. I do enjoy this game a lot. I just don't think it's as good as Undertale, but there's a lot of things here that is improved upon the first game. First of all, the music. Toby Fox never ceases to amaze me with the absolute bangers he puts in these games. They can range from a vibe a straight up bop and then there's absolute banger. Okay, that bit was pretty stupid, but I think you understand my point. The music is without a doubt a huge step up from Undertale. Another thing that was improved was the story structure and the character interactions. Undertale, the story kind of just jumped from character arc to character arc, and there wasn't much in terms of character interaction, but what we got was great. On the other hand, with Deltarune, it eases its way into the story, never feeling like we're just jumping around everywhere. The character interaction is absolutely hilarious. I died laughing in some scenes. The comedy was just a huge step up. One last thing. The gameplay, of course, is much better. You can use other characters, making it almost more about strategy than just dodging and putting in random stuff in the ag menu to see if you finally got it. Even without other characters by your side, it's still about strategy. In the Spamton fight on Snowgrave, it took me forever until I found the perfect strategy to kill him. Now, you might be thinking, wow, this sounds like an amazing game. This looks way better than Undertale ever was. Well, you're only half correct. It's a good game, don't get me wrong, but it has flaws that detract from the experience. My main issue being the story and characters. Considering that these are heavily story-based games, this can become a very distracting issue. There are 5 main characters, 7 if you count the king and queen, only 4 of which are 3-dimensional characters, and out of those 4, only 1 of them gets actual time to be seen as a 3-dimensional character. That being this absolute Chad. In Undertale, everyone in the main cast was 3-dimensional. This video isn't exactly about Undertale, so I'm going to keep this brief, so I'll only talk about one character, which will really help my other points later on in the video, that being Toriel. In the first part of the game, you are introduced to Toriel. She seems like a sweet, kind, and loving mother figure, and always tries her best to protect us. Later, when we ask her if we can leave, she attempts to destroy the exit so that way no one can leave. She has watched 6 children that she tried to protect die already, and she's not about to watch a 7th one, so she fights us when we try to stop her. After the fight, she begins to realize that she can't just take control of our lives, and she lets us go. Throughout the game, we begin to find out that she has lost both of her children in one day before the true war began, making it more clear as to why she was so clingy and didn't want us to leave, even willing to fight. On the other hand, in Deltarune, we have Susie, who was a bully, but becomes less irritable and more friendly, because we've never seen that before. Some people theorize that she's from a broken home, but those are just theories. I won't count it as fact since I'm just judging this by what we have now. Next, we have Burley, who at first appears to be your stereotypical teacher's pet, smart kid, but we later find out that he's a true Giga Chad gamer, and that he's only smart because Noel just studies with him and is therefore the true mind-sized mega. By the way, this is the only character that is explored in depth, and this is his story. And lastly, we have Noel. Now, Noelle is an interesting case, to be sure. She acts as your stereotypical nice girl, which is a big reason why I didn't really like her that much. I'm just not a fan of cliches, so keep that in mind. As we go through the story, there is a hidden story within her that is honestly really interesting. Her sister, whom she was very close with, supposedly died. That or went missing. Her father is in the hospital for a sickness that none of the characters know. It's just her and her mother, and from what we've heard, her mother is just really hard on her, adding to the pain of losing a loved one and the possibility of losing another. When she goes to school, she tries to smile and be friendly and just hide it all. That right there is a good three-dimensional character. Or at least she would have been if it weren't for the fact that that really emotional and interesting storyline was sidelined because the game wants to focus on her big crush with Barney the dinosaur. What? What? What on earth was Toby thinking? We have a really interesting story that could really hit home for some people, but instead, it was just in a few scenes with the main focus being that she's timid. And she's also apparently scared of mice. That was a pretty important plot point that a lot of people wanted to see. Sure, we would have all loved to see that instead of the really good backstory stuff. Yeah. This was a big reason as to why I didn't like her character. I wanted to, but I just couldn't. But for now, I'd like to move on to talk about realism. Now, I know that these games don't exactly strive to be realistic, but Undertale had a certain quality to it that made the world feel real. This isn't really much of an issue for me, but when compared to Undertale, it's obvious which is better. Each major action you make in Undertale has an impact on everyone, not just the character in which you are interacting with. When fighting Toriel, if you spare her, she learns to let go. If you kill her, well, she dies. But her death has an impact on other characters, specifically Sans. It's revealed later on that Sans is really good friends with Toriel, and that they always talk together and make jokes. Sans tells us that he hasn't been hearing from her much and is concerned until it dawns on him that we killed her. It makes the world feel real when other characters react to another's death. Deltarune, we can't kill anyone. I get that they try to do this thing with it like your choices don't matter, but they're only ever brought up in the first part of Deltarune Chapter 2, and then they're kind of just thrown to the side. They don't really... Toby Fox never expands upon these themes. They're kind of just there for a little bit and then pop. But in Chapter 2, we can force Noel to kill the enemies for us. And that leads to a pretty messed up route. And I'll get to that here in just a second. But there's just no effect on anything. And it feels cartoonish. This is especially true for Chapter 1. If you fight, the game plays as if you're doing a pacifist route. It really doesn't make sense. Now I'll get into both games' villain routes. In Undertale, the game slowly gets darker and darker, showing just how much more of a monster you are compared to the actual monsters. It flips the script and has a villain be a protagonist, while the hero is the antagonist. The build-up is also really well executed. Nothing feels like it comes out of nowhere. It's a natural progression. If you talk to Sans, he warns you of what will happen if you don't stray off your path, and even threatens you, until, come to find out, Sans is the final boss. He knows there is no good left in you, and he has no choice but to break the promise he made with Toriel and kill you once and for all. With Deltarune, it's a bit of a mess. In Chapter 1, the villain route is absolute garbage and doesn't do anything different from the normal route, other than have different outcome of the Chaos King fight. But in Chapter 2, things start to get pretty interesting. It goes as usual, there is no change, and it all feels fake until you play this section with Noelle. She's the only main character with the power to kill others via her freeze powers, and yet she just so happens to be one of the nicest characters in the game. So you have to manipulate her to make her think that killing is okay, until you finally force her to kill her best friend. Now that is screwed up. But where this route fails is in its final boss. It's the exact same thing as the secret boss of the usual route, except you don't have your friends with you. He also comes out of nowhere and just kind of shows up to fight you. Sure, he did give you the Thorn Ring, but that's all he does to the story, so fighting him doesn't feel climactic, it just feels out of place. Now, for my final point, the story. I personally liked Chapter 1's story. It felt like a cohesive narrative and had some pretty good emotional moments and very satisfying conclusions to character arcs, much like Undertale. In Chapter 2, however, things start to get a little clunky. The first half of this game has the most cliche plot point ever. Toby makes Noelle the damsel in distress. Now, I'm not a feminist or anything, but I hate this cliche. It's been so overused, and it's always predictable. There's only one instance where this plotline was used well, and that was in Halo 3, but I won't get into that since that's a whole nother rabbit hole. It's implemented so poorly in this game, and it disappoints me. It's truly disappointing that Toby freaking Fox, the man who made a game that almost made me cry, made a game with one of the most cliche plot elements. But in the midpoint of the game, she's out of her cage, and you get to work with her until she's captured again. There's also no emotional payoff like there was with the first chapter. Any emotional payoff that is set up just gets resolved immediately, which I hate. But I don't hate this game. In fact, I really enjoy it and find myself replaying it a lot. It's just disappointing. I know that Toby is capable of making magnificent games, but under all Deltarune's problems is buried a really good story with true weight to it. I know this is still an ongoing story, but this just wasn't all that great. I hope that these problems will be fixed in the upcoming chapters, and I hope that it will be great. I know it has potential to be amazing, but it's just not showing me that. Thank you for watching, and please make sure to like and subscribe.